They wanted my sister to walk down the aisle in a wedding dress at my wedding. That's when I knew I wasn't just forgotten, I was disposable. I'm Natalie Carter, the second daughter, the invisible one, the one who learned, from birthday cakes to college decisions, that my existence was only ever tolerated, never celebrated. Samantha, my older sister, was the miracle child. She got the praise, the gifts, the freedom, even when she lied or failed. I got silence, suspicion, and scoldings. But the day my parents told me Samantha should walk the aisle before me at my own wedding, in her own gown, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just smiled, because by then, I wasn't the same girl they raised to obey. I had someone by my side, and we had a plan. That was the day everything changed. That was the day they stopped writing my story for me. You'd think being born into a suburban family in Ohio with two parents and an older sister would be a relatively normal upbringing. But for me, normal meant ignored. It started small, subtle, even. When I was 5, I wanted a chocolate cake for my birthday. Instead, we got vanilla Samantha's favorite. When I reminded Mom, she smiled and said, "Vanilla is close enough, sweetie." That was the first time I realized my preferences didn't matter. Over the years, it was like I was a guest in someone else's home. My favorite color, irrelevant. My hobbies, too messy or too expensive. Samantha is always encouraged, praised, and paraded to relatives like trophies. She played the piano for 3 months and quit. Mom still showed the video at family gatherings like it was a Grammy performance. I wrote a short story that got published in the school journal. No one noticed. It wasn't just emotional favoritism, it bled into everything. Samantha always got the bigger presents at Christmas. I'd get 2 small boxes under the tree. She'd have a pile. I stopped hoping for things. I started saving my allowance to buy myself gifts because no one else would. When we went out as a family, it was always to the places she wanted to go. I once asked if we could try a science museum for my birthday. Samantha complained it was boring. We ended up at the zoo again, because that's something the whole family enjoys. That day, I walked behind them. I remember watching them laugh at the flamingos. I remember wondering if I was adopted. By the time I was 10, I learned to smile and stay silent. When Samantha threw tantrums, they comforted her. When I cried, I was being dramatic. When she messed up, they made excuses. When I made a mistake, no matter how small, it was treated like a character flaw. I started noticing how my dad would look proud every time Samantha entered the room. "There's my girl," he'd beam. When I entered, a glance, maybe a nod. If I was lucky, it wasn't that they outright hated me. That would have been easier to process. They simply erased me. One memory still sticks like a thorn. Samantha broke a vase during a game of indoor soccer. She blamed me. I said it wasn't me. My dad grounded me for a week and told me to stop trying to turn the family against each other. Samantha got ice cream that night. I kept journal silent documentation of every time I was overlooked, scapegoated, or silenced. Maybe some part of me hoped that one day someone would read them and finally say, "You were right." You didn't imagine it. School became my refuge. My teachers praised my essays, my classmates liked me, and I found solace in books. I wasn't the other daughter there, I was Natalie. But even at school events, the dynamic crept in. At my middle school recital, I had the lead role. My parents showed up late and missed the opening. They brought Samantha a new charm bracelet just because. Afterward, Mom kissed my forehead and said, "You were great, but your sister had such a stressful week, we wanted to cheer her up." That night, I didn't cry. I stared at the ceiling and decided something. If no one else was going to celebrate me, I would learn to celebrate myself. Quietly, patiently, until I could leave. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't Samantha's fault entirely. She learned early that she was the star, that she could do no wrong. And once you grow up being worshipped, the world looks very different to you. But she also learned something else that I was safe to ignore, to blame, to use as her emotional punching bag, and no one would stop her. I didn't retaliate. Not then. I survived. And in the process, I learned how to be invisible. I learned how to observe, how to plan, and how to wait, which, as you'll soon see, made me very dangerous when the time was right. High school was the first time I realized I had power. Not the kind Samantha had. She ruled the house, but I ruled my own space outside of it. At school, I was liked. I wasn't a cheerleader or the prom queen, but I was known. Teachers respected me. I was a decent student. And more importantly, I had friends, and real ones. The kind who invited me to sleepovers, and remembered my birthday, and asked if I was okay when I seemed quiet. Samantha didn't have that. I don't know if her friends grew tired of her lies, or if she never truly had any, but by sophomore year, she was eating lunch alone. I didn't gloat. I didn't even feel smug. I just noticed, and I braced for what was coming. Because a Carter without control becomes dangerous. It started subtle again. You're really going out dressed like that, she'd sneer before I left the house. Then she started whispering to our parents. She's lying about where she's going. Her friend Vanessa cheated on the math test. I heard her talking about sneaking out at night. None of it was true, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that Samantha was talking, and when Samantha talked, my parents listened. Suddenly, I wasn't allowed to go out as often. Suddenly, my phone had to be charged in the living room overnight. Suddenly, family dinner wasn't optional anymore. Mom would say, "You should really stay home more. Spend time with your sister." Dad would add, "Natalie, not every friend you have is a good influence." I pushed back once. "You mean friends because I have them." Unlike Samantha, big mistake. Samantha cried on the spot. Real or fake, I still don't know. Mom looked at me like I'd just kicked a puppy. Dad grounded me for emotional cruelty. I learned the hard way, never speak the truth in a house built on lies. The worst part, I started to internalize it. I began wondering, am I doing something wrong? Maybe I am hanging out too much. Maybe I should stay in. But my lifeline came from an unexpected place, our cousins. Most of my extended family lived nearby, and unlike my parents, they actually liked me. At one barbecue, my cousin Jeremy asked if I wanted to join a group trip to the amusement park. I said I wasn't allowed to go. He blinked. Why not, without thinking? I answered, because I'm not allowed to have friends, since Samantha doesn't have any. Dead silence. I didn't think much of it, but apparently it spread fast. That week, my aunt called my mom, then my uncle, then another aunt, whatever they said. It rattled my parents. I got grounded for spreading lies, but something shifted after that. The next time my cousin invited me to a movie, my mom hesitated, then said yes. It wasn't freedom, but it was a crack in the wall. And I took it. Samantha, of course, noticed. Her reaction, she begged to change schools. People are fake here. She told my parents, they hate me. I want a fresh start. They agreed immediately, even though the new school was further and more expensive. It was like watching a queen exile herself to another castle, only to continue ruling from afar. She made new friends, but she never let me go. If anything, her grip tightened. Her friends started coming over. At first, I thought maybe things were softening between us, but no. They bullied me, calling it light teasing. They'd borrow my clothes without asking, eat my snacks. One even called me the spare daughter. I complained once. My mom waved it off. They're just trying to include you. Don't be so sensitive. I stopped bringing friends home, not just because of Samantha's sabotage, but because our house didn't feel like home. It felt like enemy territory. I started keeping my relationship secret. One day, though, I made the mistake of telling my parents about someone new, Jason. Jason was kind, funny, the kind of boy who noticed when I was quiet and asked why. My parents insisted on meeting him. I begged them not to. I had a bad feeling in my chest, but I also wanted to believe maybe, just maybe, they'd act normal. Spoiler, they didn't. While I was in the kitchen helping Mom with drinks, Samantha pulled Jason aside. When I came back, he looked confused, distant. He told me later in private that Samantha had flirted with him, batting her lashes, touching his arm, whispering how protective she felt over me, and how I sometimes exaggerated things. Jason left early. We broke up 2 weeks later. I didn't cry. I just sat at my desk that night, staring at my laptop, wondering, is this what love looks like when your family teaches you to hate yourself? I didn't know it then, but I was building a kind of strength, not flashy, not loud, but steel beneath the skin. Someday I'd need it. I wish I could say what Samantha did to Jason was a one time thing, but it became a pattern, a cruel, predictable pattern. Every time I found someone who saw me not just as the other daughter or Samantha's sister, but as Natalie, they didn't last long, not because of me, because of her. After Jason, I kept my next relationship quiet. I didn't even tell my friends at first, much less my parents. His name was Marcus, and he was the first boy who made me laugh when I didn't want to, the kind who offered to drive 30 minutes just to drop off my favorite tea during finals week. We lasted 3 months longer than Jason, but eventually he had to meet my family. I tried to push it off. Let's wait until the holidays are over. I'd say he thought I was ashamed of him. I wasn't. I was terrified. Eventually, Marcus came over. Within 15 minutes of arriving, Samantha strutted into the living room in a tank top, 2 sizes too small, and pajama shorts. It wasn't even noon. She walked right up to Marcus and said, "You must be the new one. Don't let Natalie scare you off. She's a little intense." I wanted to scream, but I stayed calm. I took Marcus outside and apologized. He laughed it off at first, but something had shifted. He didn't text as often after that. He canceled dinner plans, and 2 weeks later, I got the message. "I think you're amazing, but I don't think I can handle all of this right now." All of this, what he meant, of course, was your sister, your family, the chaos. I didn't reply. I just stared at the words, then deleted the whole thread. When I tried to explain to my parents, hoping for just a sliver of validation, "I got this," Samantha said. "He made her uncomfortable. He was probably just using you. You really need to stop picking these kinds of boys." They twisted it. Again. I even tried pointing out the pattern. She said the same thing about Jason. "You don't find that odd?" My dad looked at me over the rim of his glasses and said, "Maybe you're just not great at choosing who you date." That sentence hit me like ice water. It wasn't just that they didn't believe me, it was that they used my sister's lies to write a narrative about me reckless, dramatic, incapable. They used my pain to confirm their bias, so I stopped bringing boys home. But even that wasn't enough to protect me. Rumors started circulating around school, ones that I was easy, that I made out with guys behind the bleachers, that I refused to commit because I was afraid of real relationships. I knew where it came from. Samantha still had a few acquaintances from her new school who knew people at mine. When I heard the whispers in the hallway, when I saw the looks in the cafeteria, I knew exactly whose fingerprints were on them. It didn't matter that I'd never done the things they accused me of. It didn't matter that I'd been careful, private, quiet. The damage was done. My reputation at school took a hit, but more importantly, so did my sense of self. I stopped trusting anyone who liked me. I second guessed every compliment. If someone flirted with me, I wondered, are they real? Or will they turn on me when they meet my sister? I began to withdraw. My journal entries shifted in tone from hopeful to bitter. I wasn't just sad anymore. I was angry. And yet, I never lashed out at her, not publicly, not even in private. I remember once, late at night, I stood outside her bedroom door, hand raised to knock. I wanted to ask her no, beg her, "Why do you hate me this much?" But I didn't, because I already knew the answer. She didn't hate me, she just needed me to be beneath her, and any version of me that sparkled even a little was a threat. Samantha didn't love power, she feared irrelevance. And I was everything she was as an independent, authentic, unbought, but I was also tired. And that's the most dangerous thing about people like me. When we finally get tired enough, we stop asking for love and we start planning for freedom. By my senior year of high school, I had two goals: escape, do it quietly enough that no one could stop me. I buried myself in books, test prep, scholarship applications. I didn't party. I didn't go to prom. I barely left my room unless I had to. My teachers loved me. I was on track to graduate near the top of my class. But at home, none of it mattered. Meanwhile, Samantha, now attending a mediocre private college, still came home every other weekend like a queen returning to her castle. When she walked through the door, my parents would light up like Christmas trees. How's college? Honey, don't forget to take the leftover lasagna. Do you need more gas money? If I ever dared mention my own college plans, the energy in the room would vanish. My mom would blink and say, "Let's talk about that later." I already knew what later meant in our house. It meant never eventually. Later came, but not how I wanted. It was a cold afternoon in February. I was sitting at the kitchen table, quietly reviewing scholarship essays. When my mom sat down across from me, she wore that fake smile that always preceded bad news. "Honey," she started, "your father and I have been talking, and we don't think we can pay for your college right now." I looked up slowly. She continued, "We're already helping Samantha, her tuition, housing, car payments. It's a lot. And you know things are tight." I didn't speak. Mom went on gently. "Maybe it's best if you take a year or two off, get a job, help out at home. We'll see where we are financially once Samantha graduates." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. She leaned forward, voice syrupy. "And if you want to stay here, we'll need you to start contributing. Groceries, bills, rent, just your fair share." Still, I said nothing. So she added one final blow. "Of course, if you apply for loans, we'll help you decide which colleges are worth going into debt for. We're just trying to protect you." That was the moment I knew without question they'd never seen me as worth investing in. And still, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just said, "Okay." I think that scared her more than a tantrum would have. She kept looking at me, waiting for me to fight, to plead, to bargain, but I didn't, because I already knew. I had known for years. I thanked her for her honesty, gathered my papers, and went upstairs. 2 hours later, my dad knocked on my door, trying the same conversation. I nodded through it. "Of course, I understand." He hesitated. "We're only doing what's best for you." I smiled coldly. "I know." They didn't see what was coming. They didn't know that while Samantha had been partying her way through college, I'd been preparing to disappear. I had filled out every financial aid form myself. I had applied to schools they didn't know about. I had mailed documents from the library, borrowed printers, taken weekend jobs to save up for travel and emergencies. And finally, one envelope changed everything. I still remember the moment I opened it. My hands shook. It wasn't Ivy League. It wasn't flashy, but it was solid. A well-ranked liberal arts college on the East Coast. Full ride, tuition, housing, books, meal plan. I sat on my bed for 10 full minutes, staring at the letter, unable to breathe. Freedom, but I didn't tell them. Not yet. Instead, I posted it online. A simple status, thrilled to announce that I've been awarded a full scholarship to Emerson College. Thank you to everyone who believed in me. I attached a picture of the letter. I timed the post carefully just after Samantha had returned to school. Then I walked into the kitchen and told my parents. Face blank. "Oh," my dad said, "That's impressive." My mom looked almost stunned. "You got in with a full scholarship?" I said. "Their silence was golden," I added, sweetly, "and thank you for your support all these years." "I couldn't have done it without you." They didn't smile. I walked away. Later that night, I heard them whispering in the living room, my name, Samantha's name, words like embarrassing and "how could this happen" floated through the air. And then a new strategy. They knocked again. "Natalie," Mom said, "are you sure this is what you want? College isn't easy. Samantha's having a hard time, and she's always been more, emotionally mature than you. She has better judgment," Dad added. "We just don't want you to feel overwhelmed." Translation, she's failing. You succeed and threatens the illusion. I looked them straight in the eye. I'll take my chances. And for the first time in my life, they didn't have a comeback. Packing for college felt like reverse grieving. Instead of mourning what I was leaving behind, I was shedding it, peeling off layers of expectations. Silence and invisible bruises. I stuffed my bags with old sweatshirts and spiral-bound notebooks, but I left behind the person who used to need their approval. Natalie Carter, the overlooked daughter, wasn't coming with me. At Emerson, I could start over. The campus was small but beautiful. wrapped in red brick buildings and fall-colored trees. Students walked with headphones in, backpacks half-zipped, drinking iced coffee even in November. No one knew Samantha. No one looked at me like I was a supporting character in someone else's story. The first night in my dorm, I cried not from sadness, but from shock. This was freedom. It didn't feel dramatic or euphoric. It felt quiet, spacious, like I could finally hear myself think. I dove into classes, joined a student writing group, picked up a part-time job in the library. I was busier than I'd ever been, and I loved it. My parents called sometimes, not often. When they did, it always started with a guilt-laced question like, "So, how are you managing on your own?" Or, "Are you eating okay without our help?" I'd answer politely, vaguely. I didn't let them in, not anymore. I didn't tell them that I had made friends, real ones, that my creative writing professor pulled me aside after class and said my work had surgical precision, that I went to a Halloween party dressed as Medusa and someone kissed me under the porch light. They didn't deserve to know those things. I'd come home for holidays sometimes, Thanksgiving, Christmas, but only out of obligation. I kept the visits short, my suitcase always half zipped. Samantha was always there, still living at home, still not paying rent. She had dropped out, though no one ever said it directly. My parents spun a new story. She's just taken a break. She needed time to think. She's so gifted, you know. It's hard for her to find the right fit. I smiled, nodded, said nothing. They never asked about my GPA. They never asked how I was paying for food or books. They never once said, "We're proud of you," but I didn't need it anymore. That was the thing about surviving in silence for so long, you eventually stop waiting for applause. You learn to clap for yourself. One winter break, I brought a few classmates home with me for a road trip pit stop. They were from California, curious about small town, Midwest living. We stayed 2 nights. My mom was civil. My dad tried to act proud, but Samantha was cold. She barely spoke to them, barely spoke to me. One night, I caught her sitting in the kitchen, scrolling through my Instagram on her phone. The next day, one of my classmates pulled me aside. "Your sister," she said carefully, "is, intense." I just nodded. "You have no idea," I replied. After they left, I got a text from Samantha that chilled me. "You think you're better than me now. You always have. But people like you always crash eventually." I didn't reply. Instead, I screenshotted it. I forwarded it to myself, to Ethan, who I'd just started talking to at the time, and then I deleted her number. That was my line in the sand. I wouldn't try to fix what they broke. I wouldn't open myself up just to be gutted again. The next few months were a whirlwind. Ethan and I grew closer. He was sarcastic, brilliant, and frighteningly observant. On our second date, he said, "You listen too carefully. It's like you're trying to guess what people want from you before you speak." I laughed. "It's called trauma." He didn't laugh. Instead, he said, "Let me know when you're ready to stop doing that. I'll be here." I wasn't ready then. But it planted something. And as I turned 21, sitting on a bench near the library watching snowfall, I realized something I never thought I'd feel. I was happy. Not giddy, not drunk on rebellion, just okay. And when you've spent your life trying not to take up space, feeling okay in your own skin is a revolution. I didn't know what lay ahead. I didn't know what else Samantha would try, or if my parents would ever admit what they'd done. But I did know this: they couldn't stop me anymore. Not with guilt, not with silence, not with love they only gave in pieces, because I had finally given it to myself. I met Ethan Rivera in the most unceremonious way over spilled coffee and a shared sarcasm about cafeteria bagels. He was a political science major with a minor in calling out BS, as he put it, sharp-tongued, too observant, the kind of guy who could glance at a room and clock who was pretending to be someone they weren't. Naturally, I didn't like him at first, but Ethan had this unsettling ability to see straight through me. Where others saw quiet and polite, he saw armor. Where others praised how mature I was, he asked, "Who taught you to bury your feelings so fast?" I didn't answer that the first time. I just stared at him, and he said, "You don't have to tell me. I'll wait." I'd never had someone say that before. Most people either demanded my story or lost interest when I didn't spill it quickly enough. Ethan didn't either. He stayed. He walked with me between classes, showed up with snacks during midterms. He didn't shower me with compliments. He earned my trust by noticing the little things. When I was distracted, he'd nudge me. When I was spiraling, he'd sit beside me and say it, out loud, even if it's ugly. And one night, after a storm knocked the power out in the dorms, we sat in his car with nothing but silence and headlights, and I told him everything about Samantha, about my parents, about the time I lied and said I didn't want to go to college, just so I wouldn't have to hear another lecture about ungratefulness. About the birthday where I got socks and she got a weekend trip to Chicago. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer toxic positivity. He just listened. And when I finished, he said something I didn't expect. We're going to fix this. I blinked. What? He grinned. One day they'll regret it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But trust me, we're going to make them wish they'd treated you differently. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. A quiet one. That's the thing about Ethan, he doesn't yell. He plots. Most people fantasize about revenge in passing. Ethan sketches it. He builds blueprints, but not out of malice, out of principle. He wasn't obsessed with punishing my family. He was obsessed with restoring balance. You don't owe them grace just because they gave you life. He said once, you owe yourself justice for everything they tried to take away. That's when I realized something. Ethan wasn't just my partner. He was my counterforce. Where I hesitated, he advanced. Where I stayed silent, he spoke. He was what happened when the overlooked daughter found someone who refused to let her be erased. The more we talked about marriage, the more nervous I became, not about him, but about them. I couldn't imagine inviting Samantha to our wedding, let alone giving her a front row seat. But tradition said I had to. Family politics said I had to. Ethan, he said, screw tradition. Still, I hesitated. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me still hoped my parents would rise to the occasion, that they'd see me in a white dress and finally realize what they'd done. Ethan saw that too. I get it, he said, but just remember people who have never chosen you don't get to set the terms for the most important day of your life. So when we got engaged and started planning the wedding, we decided something radical. We would do it our way. Not big, not fancy, just ours. But out of convenience and a touch of naive hope, we decided to hold it in Ohio, my hometown. The venue was gorgeous, reasonably priced, and close to my extended family, the ones who had actually shown me love over the years. That's when my parents reached out. We want to meet Ethan, they said. I froze. My stomach twisted. I told Ethan I wasn't ready. He didn't pressure me, but then he said, what if I meet them? Without you, I stared at him. You're serious. He nodded. Let me deal with them. I've been training for this my whole life. I laughed, but my nerves were very real. Just don't let them get in your head. Ethan smirked. Don't worry, I'm going in with armor and a recorder. He meant it. The man literally bought a discreet voice recorder online and practiced hiding it in his coat. This is your wedding, he told me. They're not stealing it, not this time. And so, for the first time in my life, someone walked into that house not to survive it, but to challenge it. I didn't know what they'd say. I didn't know how low they'd stoop, but I knew Ethan, and I knew he'd be ready. Ethan came back from meeting my parents with the kind of expression I'd only seen once before when he discovered mold in his off-campus apartment, except this time he wasn't disgusted. He was euphoric. Natalie, he said, practically bouncing, you're not going to believe what they just asked me. I blinked. You're smiling too much. That's terrifying. He held up his phone like it was a trophy. We got them. On tape. I sat down. Okay. What happened? He took a breath, then said it with perfect clarity. They want Samantha to walk down the aisle, in a wedding dress, at our wedding, before you. I stared at him. I'm sorry, what? He nodded. They said it would be unfair for the younger sister to get married first. So they want Samantha to get the experience of walking down the aisle at your venue, with a dress and a cake. Before you enter, I didn't speak. I couldn't. The words didn't compute. He added, they're offering to help pay for the wedding in exchange. That was their deal. It hit me like a slap I didn't see coming. Not just because of the absurdity, but because some small, delusional part of me still thought they might show up for me, just once. Instead, they were planning a photo op for my sister on my wedding day. I felt something rise in my chest rage, heartbreak, shame, but Ethan caught it before it could explode. Nope, he said, gently pressing my hands down. You don't spiral. We get even. I laughed. A broken, quiet laugh. He leaned forward. Let's give them what they want, just enough to think they're winning. That night, we laid out a plan, one so twisted, so careful. It felt like writing a script for a con movie. We wouldn't say no. We'd pretend to agree. Let them feel powerful. Let Samantha dream. Let them start spending. Then we'd take it all back on our term. Ethan, of course, would be the go-between. They already think you're unstable, he told me. Let's use that. So he went back to them a few days later with the perfect poker face. She probably wouldn't agree if you asked her directly, he told them, but if you surprise her on the day of, well, Natalie hates public scenes, she won't make a fuss, she'll be too embarrassed. He said my parents nodded solemnly, believing every word. Then came the next brilliant twist. We should avoid texting about any of this, Ethan suggested. She's been paranoid lately, checks my phone sometimes. We should keep this all verbal, no proof. And they agreed. Of course they did. Samantha, according to Ethan, started skipping around the room like she'd won a beauty pageant. I get to be the first to walk down the aisle, she sang. The delusion would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. My parents even offered to help with the planning music, flower arrangements, food, so they could feel like co-directors of their dream wedding, featuring their actual daughter. And Ethan, he started scheduling appointments with vendors and bringing Samantha along to test things. At the catering meeting, he'd taste the cheapest option and say wistfully, too bad we can't afford the best. Samantha would demand my parents upgrade the package. At the flower shop, he let her hold the bouquet I had picked and said, I guess Natalie wants something tackier. Boom. Full upgrade. They paid for premium everything thinking it was for her, thinking it would embarrass me. What they didn't know was that I'd chosen every detail intentionally. The food I loved, the colors I wanted, the venue I adored. They thought they were creating a trap, but they were funding my liberation. It wasn't all smooth, though. At one point, my mom texted me directly, sending a photo of a hideous dress she wanted me to wear. Not technically ugly, but stiff, outdated, and completely not my style. I didn't reply. Ethan handled it in person. I'll convince her. Don't worry. Samantha offered to destroy my preferred dress behind my back. Ethan pretended to consider it, nodding gravely like a soldier making sacrifices. Meanwhile, we saved scraps of fabric from my real dress to bring to my parents as proof it had been damaged. Every detail, every conversation was bait, and they took all of it. Some might say it was manipulative, but when you grow up being lied to, gaslit, erased sometimes, survival means turning the game around. I wasn't doing this to be cruel. I was doing it to reclaim something no one had ever let me own my moment. This wedding wouldn't be Samantha's dress rehearsal. It would be my debut. And by the time they realized that it would already be too late, planning a wedding should be joyful. Ours felt more like preparing for a sting operation. Ethan called it Operation Curtain Call, the final act, where the villain takes center stage thinking they've won right before the lights go out. And it worked because we played our roles so well. He was the obedient future son-in-law. I was the oblivious, overly emotional bride-to-be. They thought they were manipulating us. They had no idea they were building their own trap floral arrangement by floral arrangement. Every vendor meeting was a step deeper into the illusion. Ethan would show Samantha around the venue with mock hesitation. We're just afraid Natalie will freak out. You know she's so sensitive. Samantha would scoff and say, let her. It's not like she earned this day anyway. And then she'd pick the most extravagant package, cake tiers, imported roses, upgraded lighting. Every indulgent demand passed through her mouth, but came from our script. My parents just kept opening their checkbook. They thought they were buying glory. Really, they were funding poetic justice. The dress issue, however, needed more finesse. Mom still pushed for the approved dress, the one that looked like it belonged on a discount bridal mannequin from 1994, So Ethan played the long game. He told them I was resisting. He told them I might sneak in a different gown. He told them they had to destroy the other option just in case. That's when Samantha offered to sabotage it. We didn't let her. Instead, Ethan brought a folded piece of white satin scrap fabric from my actual dress and dramatically claimed she found it. She screamed. She thinks I ruined it. I gotta go calm her down. They bought it. Hook, line, and lace. Meanwhile, we kept all communication verbal. That was key. No texts, no emails, no digital footprint. I replied to any message Samantha sent Ethan myself, posing as him, saying things like, "Can't talk now, Natalie's upset," or "She wants to check my phone again." It painted the picture of me they wanted to see: paranoid, unstable, clingy. Ethan even slipped to my parents that I'd been obsessively tracking his calls proof. He claimed of how controlling I was. Did it sting to play the villain in their narrative? A little. But after a lifetime of being cast as the sidekick, it was almost refreshing to be noticed, even if as the wrong character. And the best part, the more outrageous the plan became, the more my parents doubled down. They weren't worried about ethics, they were worried about appearances, and in that desperation, they kept fueling the very ceremony that would expose them. Every family contribution they made, every suggestion, every demand they believed was a power play. What they didn't realize was that they were no longer writing the script. We were, even our wedding coordinator was in on it, well, unofficially. We never told her the full story, but she was professional enough to follow our lead without question. For example, when we asked for a discreet check-in table far from the entrance, she didn't bat an eye. "We'll assign one staff member for guest verification." She said, "Perfect." We hired a security guard, someone who looked like a glorified usher, but was ex-military and built like a linebacker. He had one job: if anyone not on the approved list showed up in a white dress, he was to gently redirect them to the alternate venue. There was no alternate venue. Samantha would hit a wall figuratively and literally. We even gave him a script to say, "I'm sorry, ma'am. This must be a misunderstanding. The bride has already arrived. This venue is closed to additional participants." Polite, legal, airtight. Still, we expected resistance. So we stationed Chloe, my best friend since college, near the entrance with a wireless mic under her scarf. Her job to escalate chaos if needed. If Samantha screamed, Chloe would scream louder. If my dad threatened to call the police, Chloe would threaten TMZ. Ethan's brother, Dylan, was tasked with intercepting any family member trying to retrieve me from the bridal suite. And if all else failed, my uncle, the only adult in the family who ever treated me like a human, was ready to physically escort anyone off the premises. It felt absurd. A wedding with a security blueprint worthy of a White House gala. But when your family is willing to sabotage your vows, you prepare accordingly. The night before the wedding, Ethan and I sat in our tiny Airbnb rental, eating takeout and going over the final checklist. We weren't nervous. We were ready. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the girl hoping to be chosen. I was the woman who chose herself. Ethan kissed my forehead that night and said, "Tomorrow, the show begins." I smiled, leaned back, and whispered, "Let's give them the finale they'll never forget." Weddings are supposed to be emotional. I just didn't expect mine to feel like a courtroom drama, complete with deception, betrayal, and poetic justice. The morning of, I felt oddly calm. My dress simple, elegant, unapologetically me hung by the window like a quiet rebellion. Chloe buzzed around, checking her earpiece. Ethan's brother Dylan tested the comms with the security guy, who stood at the guest entrance like a sleek, quiet wall of resolve. At 2:47 p.m., the call came through Chloe's mic. "Samantha is 5 minutes out. White dress confirmed. We were go." I took one last glance in the mirror. My eyes were sharp. My spine was straight. "Let's begin." As planned, the ceremony space looked calm and elegant to the unknowing guests. A female staffer at the welcome table quietly cross-checked names while smiling sweetly. My parents arrived first, nodding smugly, mistaking efficiency for deference. My dad gave the coordinator a signal to begin at exactly 3:00. He thought he was running the show. He didn't realize we'd given them the fake timeline. At 2:58, the doors opened. I stepped forward in full bridal attire on time, silent, glowing, gasps. My father, stationed at the entrance, stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. He instinctively turned, expecting to see Samantha behind me. But from where he stood, the entrance was blocked by columns. His phone buzzed. I saw the caller ID over his shoulder. Samantha. I looked him in the eyes, offered a serene smile, and took another step forward. That's when he mumbled something and vanished. The string quartet hesitated, confused. One of my bridesmaids stepped in smoothly, offering me her arm. She wasn't supposed to, but we'd prepared for that. The music swelled, and I walked down the aisle. There were whispers, confused glances. One elderly guest leaned over and asked, "Wasn't Samantha supposed to?" The murmur didn't shake me. I reached Ethan, who looked at me like the universe had finally balanced itself. "You're stunning," he whispered. "And you're mine," I whispered back. Meanwhile, outside Samantha had arrived, veil over her face, arms looped with my father's. She looked triumphant, until the security guard stepped in front of them. "Excuse me, ma'am, this venue is closed to additional participants. The bride has already arrived." My father laughed awkwardly. "She is the bride's sister." "I understand," the guard replied, "but this ceremony is by list only. I'm instructed not to admit anyone unapproved by the bride herself." Samantha's face dropped. "She's joking, right?" she asked. Stepping forward, the guard didn't move. "Ma'am, if you believe there's been a mistake, I suggest calling the coordinator. But I have my orders." Chloe approached right on cue. "What's going on here?" she said loudly, feigning shock. Then, turning to Samantha, "Wait, why are you in a white dress? What are you doing?" "I was supposed to go first," Samantha snapped. "That was the agreement." My father hissed, "Lower your voice." Chloe gasped for real. "You mean you were going to pretend to be the bride?" People began turning toward the commotion. Guests peeked outside. A few started filming. Chloe turned back toward the venue and said, "Just loud enough, I have to tell Natalie what's going on. This is insane." She disappeared into the building, ensuring my dad couldn't chase her. That left Samantha shrieking at the security guard while my mother ran up in heels. Breathless, demanding to speak with someone in charge. Back inside, the ceremony proceeded flawlessly. Ethan's dad stepped in for my father and walked me the rest of the way. His hand trembled slightly from emotion. I held tight. By the time we exchanged vows, my parents still hadn't returned. I didn't care. The reception began with quiet tension in the air. Guests weren't sure whether to ask about the chaos. Some did, others avoided the topic altogether. Then Ethan stood to give his speech. He raised his glass, smiled at me, then turned to the room. "I just want to thank everyone who made today possible, especially our families, who provided us with more motivation than they'll ever realize." Nervous laughter. He continued, "Sometimes in life, people try to hijack your joy. They pretend it's about tradition, or appearances, or family honor, but really, it's about control." I smiled. He didn't name names, but he didn't need to. He ended with today. "Natalie and I take back that joy. We take back her day. And we do it surrounded by people who love her for exactly who she is." Applause erupted. Chloe whispered, "They're still outside, arguing with Dylan now?" I shrugged. "Let them rot. Later." Ethan pulled me aside. "They tried to call the police," he said. "Dylan talked them down. Samantha cried and threatened to sue the venue. On what grounds, I asked?" He laughed, being denied her imaginary wedding. Apparently. Then he handed me his phone. There it was, recordings, screenshots, voicemail threats. Samantha's last message was unhinged. "You'll regret this. Everyone will know what you did. You're disgusting." He was mine first. Anyway, yes, she actually said that. I didn't flinch. Instead, I looked at Ethan and said, "You kept the receipts." He nodded, "And I sent them to your entire extended family group chat." Silence. Then we both burst into laughter. He added, "Also included messages from your mom calling you manipulative and your dad saying I was too good for you." He paused. "They're being roasted as we speak. Apparently, your Uncle Gary called your mom a washed-up pageant mom from hell." That night, my cousins danced harder than anyone. Guests hugged me like I had survived a war. In a way, I had. I never saw Samantha again that night. Word spread fast. People knew. The story unraveled itself, the request, the dress, the swap plan. Even without proof, the absence of logic, why would I ever agree to let my sister go first in my own wedding was enough. No one believed them. The next day, we flew out early for our honeymoon. We paid for everything ourselves just to avoid any strings. The moment the plane took off, Ethan held my hand and whispered, "We did it." And for the first time in my life, I truly believed I had won. Not just the wedding, but my voice and my identity, my freedom. They could never steal it again, not in whack dresses, not in family excuses, not in twisted expectations, because now, when people saw me, they saw the real bride, and she finally belonged to herself. The morning after our wedding, I woke up in a quiet hotel room. There were no screaming siblings, no parents banging on the door, no passive aggressive remarks, just sunlight leaking through linen curtains, and Ethan snoring softly beside me. And in that silence, something cracked open inside me, not a wound, but a release. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel watched, or judged, or small. I felt free. We didn't check our phones until we got to the airport. Big mistake. My notifications looked like a stock market crash. 37 missed calls, 17 voicemails, group chat messages from every direction, some angry, some stunned, some just popcorn emojis. I didn't open the voicemails. Ethan did. Samantha's voice was wild with rage. She accused me of stealing her wedding, manipulating Ethan, turning the family against her. She said he was mine first, Ethan said flatly, shaking his head. She really believes it. I rolled my eyes. She believes whatever version of reality makes her the victim. Then came the messages from my parents. Long, dramatic paragraphs accusing me of betrayal, selfishness, emotional manipulation. My dad called Ethan a con artist. My mom said we'd humiliated the entire family. Ethan screenshotted everything. He was calm, methodical. Then he dropped a message into the extended family group chat. For the record, neither Natalie nor I agreed to Samantha walking the aisle in a wedding dress before her at our wedding. The only reason this was ever discussed was because Robert and Linda Carter tried to bribe me to surprise my wife with it. Thankfully, I recorded every meeting. Thankfully, you all saw the outcome. Harassment of my wife ends now, or I will take legal action. Short, sharp, final, and then silent. A week into our honeymoon in Greece, I got a text from my cousin Danielle. Your mom showed up to Grandma's pretending everything was normal. Didn't work, everyone knows. You're a legend. A legend. That word didn't fit the girl I used to be, the one who used to cry quietly after family dinners, pretending the mashed potatoes weren't seasoned with shame. But it fit the woman I was becoming, not because I embarrassed them, but because I stopped needing their permission to be whole. Back home, life settled into something unfamiliar peace. We moved into a small apartment with a slanted roof and creaky floors. We got a rescue dog named Jojo, who barked at Ethan more than me, which I secretly loved. I finished my degree, started freelancing as a copy editor. Ethan took a remote position in advocacy law. We made just enough to cover rent, groceries, and coffee dates. And I was happy, not Instagram happy, not performative happy, just quietly content. We didn't block my parents. We just didn't reply. Eventually, the messages slowed, then stopped. Maybe they realized they couldn't guilt me anymore. Maybe they just moved on to someone else they could control. I stopped wondering why. Some doors don't need to be slammed shut. Some just stay closed because you never turn the knob again. Samantha tried one last stunt, a fake wedding announcement, online photoshopped images, vague captions, no fiancé in sight. I laughed when I saw it, Ethan said. She's still trying to rewrite the narrative, but this time it didn't land. No one cared. The magic of her manipulation had faded. The audience had left the theater. And I had better things to do. One rainy Sunday, I found the old journals I used to keep. Pages and pages of pain. Moments I thought I'd never survive. Words like invisible, unlovable. And why not me? I sat on the floor and read them out loud. Then I lit a candle. And page by page, I burned them. Not out of hatred, but closure. That girl who waited to be picked, who swallowed her rage, who apologized for being in the way she was gone. She deserved better. And now she had it. I get asked sometimes, mostly by friends who hear the story secondhand, if I regret anything. Wouldn't it have been easier to just elope? Wouldn't it have been cleaner to walk away? Maybe. But easier isn't always better. Sometimes, the only way to heal a scar is to expose it, to stop pretending it's not there, to let everyone see the wound, so they understand why you had to build armor in the first place. And more importantly, so you understand that armor isn't weakness. It's survival. Ethan still jokes that I married into revenge. But what I really married into was choice, the choice to speak, to fight, to be my own damn person, even when the people who raised me refused to see her. And somewhere, deep down, I think that's the greatest revenge of all. Not ruining their day, but refusing to let them ruin mine ever again.